We've got another great story to share with you today, an inspiring journey into local government leadership, because that's what we do here on the Halting Winter podcast. We tell the stories behind the titles, the unique paths into public service, and the moments that shape how these leaders show up, even when the work gets heavy. Every day, local government quietly makes modern life possible, and behind every service is a person doing work that often goes unseen. This is the Halting Winter podcast, and I'm Seth Winterhalter. Every week, I have the pleasure of sitting down with local government leaders from across the country that remind us where government really lives, locally, doing the work that truly matters. This is the work that builds belonging. Before we hear today's conversation, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Tyler Technologies has been exclusively serving the public sector since 1998, partnering with cities and counties to make their work more manageable, more connected, and more effective. From smarter budgeting to artificial intelligence, Tyler equips local governments with software and solutions that help leaders serve with clarity, efficiency, and impact. You can explore a variety of free resources at tylertech.com/winter. That's tylertech.com/winter. And if today's conversation resonates with you, I want to invite you to check out the Municipal Leadership Development Circle. It's a global community of local government leaders who are committed to growing together, supporting one another, and leading well in the middle of municipal pressure. You can learn more about the MLDC at haltingwinter.com/MLDC. That's haltingwinter.com/MLDC. And now, let's turn to today's conversation. My guest on the podcast today is Jennifer Callaway, town manager in Truckee, California. Oh, I can feel a little bit of the warmth already. It's been gloomy and gray this winter in Seattle, so it is refreshing to see the sun in your background, Jennifer.
The sun and a little spot of snow that's left with our 80-degree temperature today. That one's not getting any of the heat.
Isn't that wild how it can be so? It feels like, I did my undergrad in the Midwest, and Washington, especially on the west side, it's just never really, the temperature is always pretty consistent. It's either cool or, gray or, it's whatever it is, it's kind of that. Whereas when I went to the Midwest, you'd be like 20 degrees in the morning and then it's like 75 in the afternoon. You're like, I gotta have 3 outfits on me and my backpack to survive.
That is the season we are in here too. It's about 30 in the morning and it's going to be 78 in the afternoon. And yeah, you bring the layers for sure.
That is so wild. Well, I look forward to our conversation today. You were named one of the top 10 town managers by Gov Business Review for 2025. And I know that is well-deserved, an amazing career you've had. And I can't wait to dive into it and to kind of learn the insights that you've had along this way to encourage some young people, especially I think your career is not only in local gov, but in state and in some different different studies. And so it'll be encouraging to inspire, I think, some young people who maybe they're in their studies now, or maybe they are in their the first steps of their career, and they go, man, is there something more missional? Is there something more? And I always love to turn towards local gov and go, man, local gov is doing some great things at the city, county level. And so anyway, I look forward to unpacking this all. But before we do that, we got to do what we do here on the Halting Winter podcast. Take us back to the beginning. Share a little bit about where you were born and kind of the childhood that shaped you and set you off into this journey.
Yeah, thanks for having me. First off, not my first podcast I've ever done, so a little grace, please. But I'm excited to be here, and yeah, I grew up in rural upstate New York, a very small village. My high school class was 2 towns put together, and I think we were 120 people that graduated that year. So, just a small rural community. Very much, I think that's what inspired me to enjoy working in small communities. It's very comfortable when you know everybody and you run into people at the store. So I really love that aspect, and that feels like part of my roots. So I'm happy to still be working in small communities. But had a really pretty traditional childhood. I was a single mom, and her and I were, on this path, but we have a really big extended family. She has lots of sisters and brothers and are very close to our grandparents. So was really fortunate in that respect and had good opportunities for college and just was always more of a student person. Um, did some internships with some of our state assembly folks when I was in high school and was just really interested in like political science. However, I went to college and majored in accounting and thought I was going to be a tax accountant for whatever reason, and quickly realized that was not the path for me. That was not going to give me a lot of joy in my career. So, um, had shifted and was focused on public administration and just fell in love with it. So I feel like I, kind of haphazardly fell into this career, but it was right where I belong. And I get a lot of joy and sense of satisfaction out of the purpose and the mission that we are doing. And I would just say, I think a lot of times people get really stuck on this is my path and this is my goal and this is what I'm going to do. And to be flexible and open to just where is life leading you and what is in front of you and how can you take advantage of that and really work with that is an important kind of philosophy of mine. Follow your instincts and follow your joy and you'll be happy.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Okay, there's two things that jump out, but let's start with the first. As you're growing up, did you have any awareness of local gov? Did you, any awareness of elected officials or even like what a town manager, city manager was?
No, like I said, very small village. So I know we had village board members, but we don't really have staff in a village of 800 people, right? There's people that do water infrastructure and roads and stuff, but I don't think we had an official village manager. I think the board kind of chair served in that role. Not very aware at all, to be completely honest. And it wasn't until I got into high school and really the more kind of state politics in New York and doing that internship with the assembly person um, who was also an attorney. And that's actually why I interned for them because I wanted to go to law school. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting combination. Um, and then it was in college and then grad school where I did the joint degree with public administration and kind of delved more into the local government and how that works. And pretty quickly realized that you can see the impact of your work at local government where it's very lost at the state and larger levels. So that even the county level to some degree. So that's when I kind of honed in on that local government impact and experience and kind of found the purpose in that.
Yeah, I love it. It's interesting. Again, I grew up in the Seattle area, went to undergrad in Missouri, Midwest, and so I got that Midwest kind of weather experience. And then went to New York for my first master's degree in upstate New York, Annandale. So I was at Bard Conservatory of Music, Bard College there. And I just remember I had been to New York a couple times before that to do some work with Carnegie Hall and to do some music stuff. And that's why I thought New York was. I thought the entire state was just concrete and pavement and skyscrapers.
Most people do.
and when you get literally an hour out of the city, you're like, this is like more farm town than I grew up in rural Washington and dairy farm. It is just a wild experience and it's a real beautiful country. But like you say, there's these small villages that are just kind of all over the place. And you just don't really know. I grew up in a town of literally, I just checked the town of Savannah has 99 people in it. The other day I just looked and I was like, 99 people? Like, I don't even know if they have elected officials. I think it's just whoever's the fire chief down at the volunteer fire kind of runs things. And it's just these interesting environments. So so what was it in high school that led to that internship? How did that happen? What was there interest that then led to that? Did it just, what was it something the school offered? How did that come on your radar?
My goodness, you're testing my memory. I don't know if I fully remember how it came about, other than I was interested in doing an internship as I was thinking about college and different paths in college. And at the time, I was a pretty focused, you come up with a plan and a path and you stick to it, right? It took me a while to figure out that you can adjust and adapt and change your mind. That's okay. um, and I think I think it might have been a neighbor that kind of opened my eyes to the opportunity that there were the internships and this particular assembly person had a local office not too far from the town I grew up in. And that was an opportunity and I applied and was accepted. So I think it was happen chance and it worked out well.
Well, I love that you're at Syracuse and you're studying. Again, is it law? Is it going to be taxes? What's it going to be? And you're willing then to say, you have some experience, and maybe you go into that, maybe not, but whatever your experience, you have this experience that goes, this does not seem fulfilling. Like, I love that then you had the awareness, because like you just said, we can get stuck in, oh my gosh, I started this degree, now I'm stuck. Or I think about college kids today that graduate and they go, I just spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on a degree. I have to stay in this field. But then they can't find work. So they're doing something like waiting tables, waiting for something in that field to open up when there are other places. And they may either feel compelled to, oh, no, I've got to stay in this field, or they just feel like, well, I don't know anything about any other field. So I don't know, how my degree would I even have an opportunity. And that's why I think local gov has so many opportunities, because yes, and even the degrees, political sci, even an MPA is pretty broad in general, because local government's so broad. It has so many components. So we have to train our own. That's why there's all kinds of certifications and all kinds of associations, for continued training and network. So I love that your story, you had the self-awareness even at a young age to go, maybe this isn't it.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I really did love political science, and that was a minor in undergrad. And I selected Syracuse, applied there, and went there because they had the joint degree program where you could get your law degree at the same time and your master's in public administration through the Maxwell School. And so that was very purposeful and intentional. But my mind was set on I was going to be a tax attorney. And it was that first summer when I started the master's program that I was like, oh, I really love this. And then started my first tax class. I'm like, I really don't love that. It was just able to go with that instinct. But I will say, even after graduation, I was still intending to practice law. I was going to work in housing law in New York, and wasn't settling well. It wasn't feeling like it was the right thing. I wasn't finding the motivation there, and the opportunity came up to move to California and start working in local government, and it just felt right, and just went with that instinct. And again, kind of that first real lesson in follow your gut. It took some time to really grow in confidence in that, but it worked out well, and it continues to work out well.
I think it's so great, like, again, that you highlight. Wasn't just a light switch that was like, oh, okay, this isn't working. It takes some time. Like your first, you spend, I think, a handful of years as a senior examiner of municipal affairs working for the New York State Office of the State Comptroller. So you're obviously working for the state. Maybe talk about that. Like, obviously, what was the journey like in realizing that, okay, maybe this is interesting work, but it's just not you.
Yeah, and I actually really did love that work. It was really interesting. It was a great kind of combination with some of the training I did in law school and thinking about contract execution and management. Um, but I just couldn't see the impact of the work. At the end of the day, I was like, I enjoy the work, but I'm not seeing the result of it, and really wanted to get into that local government, small community impact. And that was what kind of shifted in my mind that I knew would give me a more sense of a satisfaction, more impact, and just more joy in my career.
Yeah, I hear that over and over and over from people who either maybe started working for state, or maybe they were in local gov and then they took a break and went to state, went to county, and then said, "Man, I just miss seeing the impact. I miss people." So if you're a people person and you like seeing the fruit of your labor on a very frequent basis, I think local gov, again, is one of those things that and again, you might not consider it because you have no idea. You just turn on your faucet and the water runs and you put out your trash, it gets taken away, and you don't really pay attention to all that local gov does, both that kind of, I call it hidden infrastructure. It's not really hidden. It's right in front of us. We just take it for granted.
Just don't think about it.
We're just kind of entitled to it here in 2026. But also it's the above ground infrastructure above that. And we're going to get into that when we get to Truckee. Just the festivals, the community events, the parks, the things that make life social and human, I think. And it's your local gov that's putting those things together, that's working with nonprofits, that does all this behind the scenes work that, again, we don't really know all that it does, but it's great, meaningful work. So from there, tell us about how in the world does a New York gal end up in California? Was it just like you needed more sunshine? What was it?
I stayed pretty close to home for both undergrad and grad school. And I think I was just finally ready to try something different and take on an adventure. And why not California? It seemed great, right? I'd never been there, other side of the country. Let's try something completely new. And it worked out really well. And I love living in the state and being able to work in the state. So it was a good call, but it was really just that first time, like, let's go do an adventure and see how it works out.
And an adventure you took on, because you're going to work for a tribal council and in a really unique environment. I mean, when you think about these native tribes that have, right, I think if my research does me right, it's like a 1,700 acre, 200 resident, and then they have non-residents too. And so what was that experience? Not only are you all the way across the nation, you're in a very interesting environment. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, what a great opportunity, right? To work for a native tribe and start to learn that culture and understand how that works. Super grateful for that opportunity. It was, I worked on the reservation. I got to go there every day for work, get to know um, the members of the reservation and the tribe, and just kind of understand the culture. I was working on the finance side at the time and policy implementation and working really closely with tribal members that, ultimately, hopefully the goal is to get them to be able to take over those positions if that's what they would like to do. And it was just unique. I never really had that chance to not only be on the reservation, but to learn the culture in that depth, understand what was important to that tribe and that community and the functionings of the government entity of a tribe. It had never occurred to me that that was the structure and that was how it would operate. So, loved the time, but did really want to get back to more of that traditional local government experience. And so that's when I went to Los Gatos, which um, just reinforced that that was where I was meant to be in that local government setting.
It's interesting. I highlight because, again, I always love to see people that take unique opportunities, and I think that is unique. And not only do you go all the way across the country to a different place, it has a different culture, right? California culture is radically different than New York culture, but you're going into a native experience that has a very unique culture, and so it probably opened up your eyes, I'm sure, maybe in ways you didn't even realize, to be aware of those culture dynamics. And I'm sure that has helped you in local government to really look a little bit deeper at what is a culture and what are a people and what's really important to them, what do they value, and how what are our end goals doing, because they're more than just, I think that's for local gov. I just encourage you, it's more than just delivering the water, handling the sewer. It's what those allow people to do. It allows them to live and to flourish and to create, right, more flourishing for human realities as we move forward. So it's really dynamic work.
Yeah, I think that's where the idea of like really listening to understand for me started to set in when I was doing the auditing, if you will, with the state. It was more Monday morning quarterbacks. And that's pretty easy to do. A lot of people can look back at decisions and like, oh, you should have done it this way. Um, but to be in a setting where you are really trying to understand the culture, understand what's important, really listening to hear what's behind the ask and the why and the intention started to sit in when I began working at the tribe, and really has led through my career in local government. Is, particularly in today's environment, there's a lot of requests that come into local government, and sometimes they're framed in a way that you can lose the intention behind what's happening and why is this an issue or why is this so upsetting. And to be able to really step back and try to listen to understand what's going on versus just responding is really key.
I would imagine too, I think that's such a brilliant point that you make, and a great insight for anyone listening today, especially if you're in leadership, is it's this dichotomy of a great leader needs to listen, but one of the challenges of listening is a leader, you're a thinker, and so you can listen almost too quickly, and so you're already in your head solving problems and making assumptions to get to the next point, which, especially in that environment, you really have no idea. It's probably challenging to even make assumptions because you're like, I don't know this culture. I don't know what your values are. So it puts you in a posture to really learn patience, to really learn a deeper level of listening that it sounds like has impacted your ability to then keep in that focus, even when you might be able to make assumptions, be able to kind of see the writing and know where the conversation's going, to go, no, let me really listen here. Let me really pay attention.
Yeah. And I'm not perfect. I certainly fall back into the assumption. We're all humans and we do that, but I do think it has helped me learn. It did help me learn patience and that like conscious effort at listening.
Yeah, so good. So the town of Los Gatos, it's I think the southern part of San Jose
That's great.
area. I had Jenny Haruyama, a city manager in Eugene, Oregon, on episode 269 a few weeks ago, and a great story. And she's been in that. I think she was actually in that city or around there. And so tell us about what it was like. Now, this is going to be your first foray into an actual town. You're going to be the finance and budget manager for a number of years. Then you're going to become the assistant town manager. What was it like now to be in the actual weeds of local gov?
So interesting fact, I actually took when Jenny left Los Gatos, I actually filled her position. So I know Jenny very well. Small world that we all live in. Um, but yeah, I can't say enough about working in Los Gatos. It was an incredible experience. Made really lifelong friends that I worked with. Had great mentorship and great opportunity. Well, that's just another, I think, lesson that I know I try to carry forward and offer to people here. If people want opportunity and want to be invited into really challenging conversations as a mechanism for learning and just kind of understanding more of the background of how things work, I was given that opportunity, and I hope I'm paying that forward to people that want the same opportunity. Um, Again, just great mentors and really gave me challenging work, recognized that I was open to that and really wanted to learn, really took time to talk through things with me and help me understand more of the context, more of the why. I can say, like, I don't think we did anything transactionally in Los Gatos, right? Everything you had, you understood the purpose and you understood the why, or at least I always did. And that was because of the investment in the time and the mentoring that I received there and just that great opportunity. The community is great. It's another really small town, bigger than Truckee, 30,000 ish people, but small town and a very small town vibe in the community. Once you get into Los Gatos, you almost forget that you're, at least back then, you forgot that you were really in the Bay Area because it felt so close knit and it's like a small little community in town. It was great.
April is National County Government Month. It's a time to recognize the amazing work counties do to keep our communities running. From public safety and courts to health services, infrastructure, and everything in between, counties carry an enormous responsibility, and they do it in ways most people never see. And right now, one of the biggest conversations happening across county and local government is how artificial intelligence can help support that work. You know who's helping lead that conversation in local government? That's right, it's Tyler Technologies. Tyler's been helping counties and local governments apply AI in some significant ways, streamlining routine tasks, improving access to information, and helping staff spend more time focused on serving their communities. To help leaders understand what's possible, Tyler has released a brand new ebook. It's called AI for Impact: Proven Results for Government. It highlights inspiring examples of organizations already using AI to strengthen operations, to improve insights, and to make government services easier for residents to navigate. The best part, that ebook is free. You can download it today at tylertech.com/winter. Again, that's tylertech.com/winter. Now, back to the conversation. What was it like? So a finance and budget manager, it seems like that kind of fit your skills, your talents. When you became the assistant town manager, was it kind of like, oh, what is this? Now we really have to be over all things. What was that like? And when a part of your journey was it here? Is it in the next stop in Sonora? When was it that you were like, I really think I want to be a city manager?
That's a great question because I think, in all truthfulness, I thought assistant town manager or assistant city manager was like the end game for me. Like that was the goal. Once I realized the local gov was my vibe, that was the goal. And when I got there, I was like, oh, maybe there is something more. But it was a big change. You know, we were the everything loves a spreadsheet culture in finance down to like more of the broader stuff that we were processing, payments for and doing budgets for, but even at that level, starting to close more of the connections between the roads and the infrastructure piece and the negotiating the contracts and negotiating the work and all the prep work that goes around. Like I really started to see that bigger picture and understand even the broader context of the why, how how police functions operate. I was so fortunate to be working with a chief that really took time to explain that to me. And that's been valuable to me to this day. But it wasn't just the budget request. It wasn't just read the staff report. It was understanding the operations. Um, and I just love that experience. I'm not sure I was really great at it when I first got in the role, to be honest. It was a big learning curve for me. Um, but it was really, I can't even describe how much that meant to me to have that experience and how much that shaped me.
I love it. From there, you go to the city of Sonora. I think this is east of Stockton, California. I did a little work with the Stockton East Water District down there and their team. And so unique. Tell us a little bit about this city. And I always love to it's one thing to work in your first city and kind of go, oh, this is local gov. This is kind of how it functions. One of the crazy things about cities is not one of them is run in similar. I mean, I always say from state to state that we've got different, all kinds of different functions and the way things work. But even inside the state, even neighboring cities don't operate the same with how their councils and other boards. And so tell us about what was it like to be in your second city, and tell us a little bit about Sonora.
So Los Gatos, I mentioned, was about 30,000 people in a very affluent community. And transition to Sonora, the cost of housing in the Bay Area was just too much. So Sonora was a much more affordable area. Transition to the city there and much more resource constrained. So there was that issue. And then much, much smaller in terms of population, and the only incorporated community in the county. So there was that element as well. And I would just say generally different politics as well, a different political culture there. I learned a ton of working in a more constrained, resource constrained environment, not only financially, but just spatially as well. It was a very small, square mile city, and not a lot of room for build out, not a lot of room for growth. So you were constrained by revenue growth from that perspective as well. And the interests of the community were different than in Los Gatos. So that was a good learning opportunity. Town hall was a very small building. There was about 7 of us that worked in the city hall in Sonora, 7-ish. So very small staff, very close-knit staff. You right in the middle of downtown. So it was very easy to walk and get to know the business owners, grab coffee. Los Gatos is close to downtown too, but it was much bigger. So it just felt a little bit further away. But I really learned to work within the opportunities that are offered to you. So it doesn't matter what revenues are available. This is what you have, and you learn to figure out how to make things happen within those constraints or within those opportunities. Got to be really creative there, like really learn to I'm very solutions oriented. So that's kind of my mindset. And I kind of do go there pretty quickly. I think a lot of local government people do, but took the opportunity there to think more creatively about how to achieve the goals of the community and the council within the resources that we had, whether that was phasing, whether that was PG&E was the utility provider there, and you could sell these credits that you would get for like undergrounding. It was meant for undergrounding utilities, which is super, super expensive. And we had an opportunity to sell some of ours to help with another project, and that worked out well for the city. But it was that space that I was given and that opportunity to like come up with ideas, and everything's on the table. And that is that's ideation is something I love. It's something I thrive on, and having that, it takes courage for a council. And I think even, my city manager there at the time, but the staff to give space for ideation and also accept that it might fail, it might not work. So there's a lot of courage involved in that just across the board. But Sonora offered that, and it was great.
I love that. We just had Jessica Levens on down in Florida. We've had Amanda Mack on who mentioned Working Genius. And that's one of the things in Working Genius is ideation. And you don't see that often in local gov. Sometimes in really all government, it just kind of, what's the default motto? Well, this is the way we've always done it. And so I think when you find these opportunities in places where you can be creative, where you can invoke the wonder and the ideation and the ability to, because no place needs it more than local gov, because you have so many constraints. You do have budget, you have space. I love that you brought that up, space issues. This is interesting. You said it's the only incorporated city in an entire county. And so I would imagine then, what was the relationship like with county? Was that, we oftentimes hear there's friction between county and city, and yet like you have space, you have budget. What does it look like? It sounds like a really rural environment out there, where I would think that the city, if you're the only incorporated city, was it a place where people then from the whole county would come for like shopping? And what did it kind of look like? Give us a feel of what were some of the challenges, what were some of the cool opportunities there?
Well, from an operational perspective, it certainly was the economic hub of the county. So my numbers might be slightly off, but residential population was like 5,000, but it could swell during the day easily to 30,000 because everybody is coming in to get all of their provisions, to go to the doctor, visit the hospital. The county building was almost next door to city halls, very, very close. So that's where all the county workers were, um, very vibrant during the day from that perspective. And you have to be able to fluctuate. Like you think of police services, you're fluctuating from, 5,000 on a random Wednesday evening at 8 o'clock to potentially 30,000 people during the day. And how do you do that coverage? How do you make sure there's enough resources on when they're needed? And then the county relationship was, I guess I've been lucky in that regard too, because I have not worked in a community that we didn't have a good relationship with the county. We, rely on the county for a lot of health and human services support, mutual aid support with public safety, dispatch support. In our case here, we use the county dispatch, and just overall partnership. I would say, we get all of our estimates for our revenues and property tax from the county, and we've been really fortunate to have that relationship in the communities that I've worked in, at least in the roles that I've worked in. So I can't speak to that conflict, although I have heard that as well. um, but yeah, Sonora was fascinating to learn how to adjust to those varying degrees of people within the community at different times and special events. And the main road through town was a state highway. So how do you work through that as well if you're closing it down for the parade or whatever the case may be, and working with Caltrans and making that happen.
I love it. I think that's what it just takes. It's easy to kind of, it's easy to play, just in your field with just your team. And it takes, creative thinking, creative leadership to partner together. And that's where I think of Peter Crichton out in Maine, was a county and city leader. And he said, when he went from the city to the county, he said it was kind of like going to the dark side. People were like, why are you going to the county? But he, over his 2 decades career there as the county administrator, made huge inroads into bringing cities together and really partnering. That's because we're all trying to create human flourishing. So, and I think we can all do that better together. So I love that. I love hearing that. From Sonora, you end up in Morro Bay. Tell us a little bit about, this is between, I have between Bay Area and Los Angeles. So is that like in the middle of the state? Like what, tell us about
literally the Central Coast. So you are, you are spot on. I've worked in amazing, beautiful communities. So that Morro Bay is right on the coast. Probably one of the last real like fishing harbor kind of communities in the state. About 10,000 people, from a land mass area slightly bigger than Sonora. Not much, but slightly bigger than Sonora. Also very built out, essentially, community at the time. And in an older community in terms of infrastructure and the assets of the community, if you will. So still like super close to my heart. I also made a lot of really great friends in the community. And another one of those communities where you're in the grocery store and you're running into people that are at the meetings and you've come to know and having conversations. And when you get to know the community members as humans, we're all humans, right? And when we ground ourselves back into that humanity, I think that just, you're off to a better start right from the beginning. And Morro Bay is divided from a policy and political perspective, but also very much a small community, and those small community family events that they put on my first community that I worked in no, that's not true. But like the fire and the recreation services were part of the operational components of the city, which I hadn't had rec before. So that was a new experience. And again, I was fortunate I got hired 2 days before the city manager. So we started right at the same time. He did not hire me. The interim hired me. So that was a little risky, worked out great. Um, but also um, we had a lot of similarities. We got along great. And he also offered that space for creativity and ideation. I love that you brought up Working Genius. We've done that here in Truckee, but really believe in strengths and the results of the Working Genius assessments. But Scott was really great. And, I started out as finance director. When I left there, it was in COVID that I was acting public works director and public information officer. And I bring that up only to say, like, that's the opportunities that were handed to me. And without those opportunities, I would not have had the chance to learn even more about those operational areas, really grow in that and those career goals, and understand that, like, being a town manager, city manager was even a possibility. So a lot of great gratitude for all of those opportunities.
You've just hit it, because that's what I want to go into. Okay, so the person who went to school for law and tax and accounting all of a sudden becomes, right, finance budget manager. Okay, we can see that connection. Assistant town manager. Wow. Okay. When you're in Sonora, you were administrative service director, which sounds like a coat rack. You probably wore a lot of hats there. But now you come in as the finance director, but acting public works director, PIO. Well, public works, that's like shovels and streets. How in the world help us connect and encourage maybe not only young people, but maybe there are people just in local government who go, I've always been in this. How in the world? I have no idea public works. Like, it sounds like local government, especially in leadership positions, it is more about leadership than you have to know how to make asphalt. Like, give us a little bit about what were some of the intimidations, but what was it like leading in those various positions?
What was really nice about that progression in Morro Bay is by the time I moved into the public works director role on the interim basis, I knew the staff. So we already had that, trust in relationship. I wasn't the finance director that just stayed in the office looking at the spreadsheets all day. Like, it's really part of who I am to know all the team members, know every community builder we have in an organization. And so that's just core of who I am. So knowing the staff was helpful. That wasn't perceived as this person that knew nothing about public works. So that was very helpful. And also the humility to say, you know what, I don't know how to pay a row, but I don't know that I need to. You're the expert in that. And I'm going to rely on your expertise, and I'm going to ask questions, and I'm going to grow in my understanding and give you advice. It is more about the management and the leadership than the specific topic area. And I still say that today. I'm not an expert in community development and planning, but I can ask the questions and I can learn quickly and have the aptitude to learn. So I rely on my teams, and I've had great teams. They are experts in their areas. They help me grow in my knowledge, and we kind of lead through that together. And it also kind of taught me that a lot of what we do comes down to instinct. At the end of the day, you're following your instinct. And you have to be willing to say, probably didn't make the right call in that time. And that's okay. We can't be perfect all the time. Our saying here in Truckee is we like new mistakes. So as long as we learned from the old mistake and try not to repeat that one, new mistakes are welcome. It just means you're growing.
Let me ask you something. If culture really matters in your organization, why isn't it being built with intention? Not discussed, not delegated, actually built and then sustained with just as much intention. Here's the hard reality. Culture isn't what your organization believes. It's what your leaders tolerate, reward, and repeat. In most cities and counties, they say culture matters while leaving it completely to chance. That's why this April, we are doing something different. Inside the Municipal Leadership Development Circle, you know it as the MLDC, we're kicking off a 3-month deep dive into organizational culture, weekly content, conversations with leaders across North America, and live training sessions from the Leadership and Culture program. We're going to work through the ideas and insights from books like Turn the Ship Around, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and Unreasonable Hospitality. But more importantly, we're going to translate those insights into how you actually lead your team in the unique context of local government. For the first time, we're opening this up in a big way. We're offering 500 memberships to the MLDC for just $500. That gives you full access to the MLDC, the weekly content, and the vibrant community of leaders from across North America. But here's where it's really over the top. We're giving 3 months of insider access to the Leadership and Culture program. That's a $2,500 value. We're doing this because transforming City Hall from the inside out isn't just optional, it is necessary, and it's necessary right now. But here's the catch. We kick off our first live training session on the topic of culture on Thursday, April 16th. And so once the 500 spots are gone, they're gone. So if you're ready to stop talking about culture and to actually start building it, I want you to head over to HaltingWinter.com/MLDC. That's HaltingWinter.com/MLDC, or simply just use the link in the show notes. Secure your spot today. Now, back to the conversation. I love it. And I can't agree more. I think it's one of the things I do a lot of coaching on inside of local government specifically is kind of the aversion to risk. It's like, and it's because that it's like, if we take risk and we get it wrong in this kind of environment, even though local government's supposed to be kind of apolitical, it's hyper political, it's hyper visual. So people, right, it's kind of like, oh, if I make a mistake, then I can get fired or I'll have consequences, and no one wants that. So it's just better to play it safe and just kind of do the same old. And that just doesn't help us, I think, create better human flourishing. So I love that aspect, that your kind of motto is, hey, mistakes are fine. We just don't want to make them twice. Like, right. Let's learn. And you can't learn without, I love that if you read, if you study, I love biographies. And if you study, especially championship athletes, they all say, I don't learn through championships. I learn through failures. I learn through loss. That's one of the only place where you can really learn. You're not really learning when you win the championship. You're just accepting,
Absolutely.
I've learned it. So I love that. What in the world happens? Well, obviously we know the pandemic happens, but during the pandemic, you decide, you know what I'd like to go become a town manager. You end up in Truckee. This is going to be your first town manager position, and it's October 2020. And I know for the West Coast here, I know it's different all over the world and all over the US, but the West Coast was one of the kind of the longest for kind of engaging in all the realities of the pandemic. And so October 2020, at least for Washington, we're still kind of in shutdown. We're still trying to figure out what does back to office or what does back to life mean. So what did that look like entering into Truckee at that time, into a new place, into a new position with, I'm sure, a lot of people looking for answers?
Excellent question. So I'll back up a little bit, because how I ended up serving as PIO in Morro Bay was because of COVID. The fire chief was the EOC manager, obviously, at the time, and Emergency Operations Center when we established that with COVID, and called me up and was like, hey, I think you'd be great at being PIO. Can I put you down on the sheet? And I'm like, sure, why not? Let's give it a try. I went back to that because I also think that helped remind me of how much I enjoy the breadth of work we get to do in local government. It was fun. You got to be really creative in messaging. And I loved talking. It took me a while to figure out why I was getting all the calls about COVID. And then I realized, I'm listed as PIO on the website. But I love talking to the people and really trying to, help through whatever the situation it was with COVID. And there, again, we did really creative things. We started up, we called it a VOAD, Volunteer Organizations Active in Disaster. Started that up, got purchase cards out to people, and we had volunteers going to get prescriptions for elderly that couldn't get out during COVID, and picking up groceries and dropping them off. And we did that really quickly. And it was because we had the opportunity to be creative, think outside the box, kind of stretch the parameters of what we would normally do as an organization. And that reminded me that I love the spreadsheets, but I also like getting out of them. Um, and I couldn't say that I was actively looking for a new job. Always loved the foothills, loved Truckee, visited Truckee, Lake Tahoe. And so I was reading the local news up here on a fairly regular basis and saw in the newspaper that the city manager was, or the town manager was retiring. And so I was like, that's interesting. And I really thought it was a stretch, to be honest. Like, I thought, I don't know if I'm really ready. I've probably got some more things to learn and do. And I loved Morro Bay, so I wasn't really looking to leave the Central Coast. But I ended up figuring out through council meeting minutes who the recruiting firm was. And I called them and just said, this is my background. This is kind of my resume. Do you think this is even like worth the chance of applying? Does this fit with what the council and the community is looking for? They were pretty early on in the process, and the crew was like, "Yep, you should apply. Go through the process. We'll see." And ended up making it to the first round of interviews. And I still was like, "Wow, like I got past first round of interviews. This is amazing." And I will tell you, I spent countless hours. I think I watched 2 years worth of council meetings to understand the council dynamics. And it was, various years. So they weren't all the same councils, but just to kind of get a sense of community values and community character and council priorities and interests. When I came on site for the interviews with the finalists, I walked into the department head interview and I was a bit taken back because I felt like I knew them all from watching all these council meetings, but they had no idea who I was. And I kind of had to apologize. I'm like, I know you all, so please forgive me if I'm a little casual. But all of that prep paid off, obviously, and really did offer me the opportunity to come in during a very challenging time, but with a foundation of the community and understanding community values to some degree. It was, I guess I was the first town manager. I'm only the fourth town manager in the town of Truckee. The town is a pretty young organization. We incorporated about 32 years ago. So fourth town manager, first woman town manager, and coming in during a time of COVID when we were open when I started, and about 3 weeks after I started, the community shut down again. It was that Thanksgiving surge where everything shut down. And of course, we all know the year ahead of us in terms of opening, shutting down, vaccinations, masking, all of the challenges. And it made it hard to get out and visit the business owners. Like, you really couldn't do that. All the meetings were on Teams and Zoom, and even with a lot of the staff, they were that way. So I think it took me longer. I think it took me longer to find the stride and to build the relationships, longer than I would have liked. But you keep at it and you keep trying to understand what's going on and how we're going to adjust. And the team here is amazing. They're just rock stars, and all the staff here. And I could trust them. I could lean into their knowledge. They were very supportive, still are. It's one of the organizations that I say the authenticity of purpose among every staff member in the town is so genuine and so real. And it's not just, I want to work in public service. It's, I want to work for the community, for the town of Truckee. And it is like an ingrained part of the culture. And probably because we're still a fairly young organization, that hasn't diminished, but it's really inspiring to see that still.
I love it. Okay, for the national audience, I want to give a sense of where and what Truckee is. So you're north of Lake Tahoe, and so we've had Joe Irvin on. He was a previous city manager of South Lake Tahoe, who's now in Malibu. Lucky him. Look, I don't know if that's a good exchange. I still have to have him on and talk to him. It's 35 minutes southwest of Reno, Nevada. So again, a unique place. And I'm sure talk about, again, I think it's 17,000-ish people. And so is, I think when I think of Tahoe, I think of tourism, and I think of kind of this, these beautiful places that are kind of the serene wilderness environments, and yet everyone comes to them, and it's like the vacation getaways. And so, in just the dynamics of these kind of places that swell with it. I don't know if, again, I'm kind of just talking. I don't know if Truckee's even tourism, but what is it like being in that unique environment? Again, if Reno is close, that's, again, destination city. Just give the national audience a perspective of Truckee and kind of what it was then when you came in, and what it is now, and kind of some of the challenges, some of the cool opportunities ahead of you.
Yeah, so you're pretty spot on. We are a heavily tourist driven economy. We border, Nevada, so another state with very different politics, very different rules. Highway 80 runs right through the middle of town, divides our town actually, and then same with the railroad. Um, so we are constantly talking about and evaluating not only the housing impacts of that. We have about half of our homes are second homes here. So we have a housing issue like many other communities in the country, but a lot of our housing is vacant. So how do we balance that dynamic, and is there anything we can do about that? Our local workforce, because we are so tourist driven, such a destination spot that during COVID, many people were here and decided to stay or moved up here because now you could work remotely. The cost of housing just skyrocketed. I think the average was, $700,000 before COVID, and then went up to like 1.2 million was the average. So our local workforce was getting priced out of this market, having to go down to Reno to commute in or leave the area altogether. Um, so those challenges are not unique. A lot of places did experience those, but for our small community, it felt very heightened. So we were dealing with that right when I started. Was all of that, and then that growing sense of like our community just is changing. Like we have less of our culture and our community values, and all of those are changing. And again, something I think a lot of places experience, but in a small town, it maybe is more the feeling around that is heightened and more under a microscope. You layer that on with there are in the region up here about 19 special districts. So the town of Truckee, I mentioned, incorporated about 32 years ago, 33 years ago, and we were the last to incorporate. So what that means is the fire district incorporated because we needed fire protection. There's a sanitary district that does all of the collections of wastewater. Then there's a separate treatment district that does the treatment of the wastewater. There's another utility district that does the electrical and the water distribution, the school district, the hospital district, the airport district, the rec district. So we have all these agencies that have these different jurisdictional controls, and by the way, different jurisdictional boundaries. So we're not all even in the same footprint. And it's very confusing. It's confusing for people that have lived here a long time, and it's confusing for people that haven't. And you have a question about rec services, the natural place to go is to call the town, yet it's not in our jurisdiction. So we really have to work collaboratively together and have strong partnerships, and all be very much in alignment on the things that we're doing, and understand that we can't expect the community to track with us on everything. Like there's a lot of districts to be following and a lot of different subject matters to be following. You can't just come to the council meeting and learn it all. Um, so that's something that's been interesting. I've never worked in that environment before where we've had all these special districts, and they all have their own boards, they all have their own general managers, they all have their own staff. So it's a huge culture of volunteerism as well in terms of serving on boards and running for boards. That is part of who we are as a community. But there's these layers of complication that we have to work out. Like we are in charge of evacuation, but we don't oversee fire. So we have to be really coordinated with a response to a fire in terms of how are we communicating evacuation, who's making the call if we have to evacuate, the messaging, all of that. So very interesting dynamics.
That is wild. I've never heard of so many different districts, especially for such a, again, for a not, it's not like you're a city of, hundreds of thousands of people. And so trying to figure out the communication the collaboration. I mean, was one of the things that you've been noted at is community engagements. One of the reasons I think you were highlighted as one of the top 10 city or town managers is that just how do you communicate well? But I think it goes back to your story. There's a listening aspect. There's a transparency aspect. I think of just saying. I mean, the temptation of leadership is always to have it figured out, right? Is to come across with confidence. And we do that because we want to create stability and we want to create peace. But at the same time, like you have to be transparent with people. And I'm sure that's, I just remember having a conversation with, Sean Bell in Fountain in South Carolina. And he was talking about, way less than they're like in 3 counties, I think. And so like someone will call wanting some street repairs and they'll be like, well, that's not us, that's the county. But they go, hey, you tell us and we'll call the county. They don't want to make it hard on their people. But man, I would say your staff must be, because it's not just you, is probably the person who, is one of the head leaders connected with all those other leaders of those things. But your staff needs to know what's going on, who are we working with, what are they doing? I mean, goodness gracious, that is a lot of communication that has to happen. And I would imagine in communication like that, for your own organization, it's easy to just go, well, of course, we all know what's going on. And everyone to take that kind of default, like, well, of course the city knows what we're doing. We're water, we're power, and it's like, we have no idea. Like that must be just the work of communication between all those. Sounds like a full-time job in itself.
There is. So we had a couple of years ago, we had a consultant come in and we did a whole operational assessment of the organization. And for me, it was about just being kind of in our adolescence as an agency, understanding like where we're going in the next 20 years. What are we trying to accomplish and what our needs are from a staffing perspective, understanding the landscape here. And one of the things that consultant pointed out was the amount of effort and time it takes to just maintain the relationships with all the special districts really is in itself a full-time job. And, I didn't even layer on the fact that we are in Nevada County. 10 feet outside of Town Hall is Placer County, which is the Lake Tahoe. In eastern Placer County is Lake Tahoe. So we have a lot of similarities with Lake Tahoe in terms of the tourism and the traffic and congestion and, all of that, the housing prices and the housing crisis. Nevada County, the rest of the county is down the hill from us. So it's like an hour away from us. We're literally separated by the mountain. And it is a very different dynamic and culture. So we have 2 different counties that we're kind of part of, I'll say loosely, and working with, one of which we aren't really part of, but we definitely have a lot of similarities with. Our transit crosses over. We kind of co-fund that. So you're figuring that balance out too. But, the founders of the town and the initial leadership of the town started these area manager meetings. And so we all get together at a minimum every other month, but a lot of us are having meetings, in between that. And we sit around a table and we just talk about what we're doing and what's coming up. And that's the opportunity to kind of coordinate. Oh, you're doing a fee schedule update. We shouldn't do ours now. Or you're doing a tax measure. We can pause ours, or, try to figure that out. So it's a little bit more streamlined for the community. But it takes a lot of effort.
Yeah, I would imagine it'd be if communication isn't working together, it could be just whiplash for the community. They could just throw up the hands and go, "We're not voting for anything. No more bonds. No nothing." And you could overwhelm just the normal resident. I think about when you mentioned the housing. I remember talking to Joe Irvin about the housing situation in South Lake. I just had lunch a few months ago with John Morrow, who's the city manager up here in Port Townsend, Washington, which is kind of a touristy but a small town. And he said, like if we hire new police, new fire, like they can't live in the city. It's too expensive. And so I think that's one of these, with the people that it's not just the the people that, work at your hotels and, your restaurants and some of those positions who, yeah, obviously, how can you afford to live how can you afford to buy a $1.2 million house on a, waiter or waitress salary? And yet, like, there's the essential services too that we don't think about. Like, yeah, where's the police gal going to live? Like, what does that look like in such a unique place? Like you said, I remember, I think Joe mentioned they were trying to work with with those people who only have basically summer house getaway houses and go, can we use your house? Can there be some kind of, can people live, Airbnb-ish kind of reality? Just trying to think creatively, because these are the things that people don't realize that. And then how do you fund situations as well with swells and tourists? There's a lot of dynamics, I'm sure, that are on your mind. And again, ideation's great, but you also have to fulfill those things. Those are real demands. What does that look like? How are you guys thinking through housing? Because housing, it just seems like it's everywhere, but specifically that's a unique environment for you guys.
I love talking about housing, so I'm glad we got to this topic. We talk about it all the time. And I was, our organization really set themselves up for success even before I started. I just got to get to carry the torch, I guess. But right when I started, it was an election year. So we had a new council when I started. And the community had just approved a transient occupancy tax, the hotel tax add-on. And while it was a general tax, meaning it could be used really for anything, the commitment was that it would go into housing. So we had this $700,000 million-ish set of money that we had committed to using the council. So I walked into that, or using the council had committed to using for housing. I walked into that, which is a gift, right? Like, okay, you've got a problem, but you also have a funding source. And the council at the time, and continues to be, very supportive of, again, giving that space for ideation, accepting that it might not work and we might need to iterate or revisit a program. But we had just worked with a local company and launched a program that is now being replicated nationally in some communities. And I think it's what probably Joe was referring to. We call it Lease to Locals. And it is an incentive program to take your short-term rental and convert it into a long-term rental for a member of the local workforce. And workforce for us is defined by school district boundaries. So it's far outside of the town limits, but it's within our regional grasp. And it's working 30 hours or more a week for an employer within those boundaries. And so property owners that sign up agree that they won't short-term rent. We give them an incentive, and it's now based on how many bedrooms they rent. So if it's a whole house that has 4 bedrooms, they can rent to a family, or they can rent to non-related parties that want to co-share a home. And the incentive amount is up to $18,000, depending on, again, how many people they're housing and how many bedrooms they're opening up. And that program's been really wildly successful. We're in about year, I guess, 5 of that program with some different iterations, but I think we've found the sweet spot of what the right incentive amounts are and how to operate that. And then that spawned into another unique program that I don't think is anywhere else, that we call Rooted Renters. And that program is not a conversion program, it's a preservation program. So for people that have a home, whether it's a second home, whether it's their home and they have a bedroom, but will commit to a 3-year contract to rent out the space to a member of the local workforce, we give them an incentive. So that's a 3-year commitment. We have a little bit more stability for people. It doesn't have to be the same renter, but it has to be a workforce renter the whole time. And we're just in our 2nd year of that program, going into the 3rd year at the start of the new fiscal year. And what we're finding is the incentive amount is significant enough that we've filled all of our spots within hours of opening up the application period. So that's really encouraging. But the data is now showing that the rental prices are coming down and the homeowners are able to lower their rents in order to keep it very affordable for those that they're renting to. So we're really excited about that. And then we think of all these housing programs as different tools in our toolbox to solve the housing issue. So then we needed to address home ownership. Like, we had some rental programs in place, but what do we do about home ownership and really housing stability? We're very focused on data driven decisions and data driven programs. So the council set a goal early on of having 10% of our housing stock be deed restricted to workforce. So we place a deed restriction on homes, and then only workforce members can occupy those homes. Um, and so our home ownership program is for people buying a home. You don't have to be a first time home buyer, but you're buying a home and you're willing to sell the town a deed restriction. And that's a 55-year commitment that if you sell the home, you will sell it to a member of the workforce. There's no appreciation cap other than it has to be a member of the workforce that can buy it. Um, and we are closing now on home. I just signed papers for home 32 in the program. So that's, 32 families that have housing security, and 32 more homes in our inventory for the future. But we essentially give the person buying the home, or the seller could do it as well, um, up to $150,000. And they can use that for the down payment. They can use that to do repairs. They can put it in the bank. We don't really dictate what they do with that money other than that's the price of the deed restriction. It's very expensive, but in the long term, we're trying to create this real secondary market for members of the workforce to preserve their ability to stay in the community. And with all of our housing programs, including some of our development code incentive requirements, we've housed just shy of 900, or we have 900 deed restricted units of housing in our community, and our goal is 1,500. So we're on our way. We are continuing to think of creative ways to offer new development incentives as well. We have our first partner program project that's going to start construction in May here, and that'll be 12 units of fully deed restricted apartments for local workforce. So we keep learning from these programs. We partner with the developers, hear how it's working from their perspective, what their constraints are, particularly for new development, what the right incentive amounts are, like how much is that deed restriction for a new development to help make that pencil. So developers are at the table with us. We're engaged, we're collaborating, and we're starting to see real solutions for that. And now we need to figure out more funding to support that, because they are very expensive programs, and housing is just an expensive topic to find solutions for. But it's really fascinating and just really interesting to try to figure out the dynamics of a community that in theory has plenty of homes, but they are not all available to be housing either workforce or even full-time residents.
Wow, that's so cool. That, like you say, there's so many parts of that puzzle to figure out, because you have so many participants. You have buyers and sellers and builders, and man, that's a lot of things to navigate. But I love it. I love that you're thinking creatively, and it seems like that's really your gift. I love these podcasts because you get to kind of hear the unique personalities and makeup of these leaders, and they're so different, right? You're bringing your specific gifts, ideation, and I think communication to the table, and you're seeing flourishing. There are others who would go about it a different way because that's their makeup and their personality and their giftings. And guess what? There's flourishing there too. So I just love it. I think that's the beauty of this work, is it's so expansive. And I'm sure that's just one of the problems on your plate, housing. You have so many other challenges. And so it is a work that's never boring, I'm sure. It's probably the opposite, a little overwhelming. And so I want to, obviously, I always end talking about work-life balance and how do you do it in this role. But before I get to that, let me ask you this, because I do want to highlight one of the cool things about you have challenges and you have things, and those can be frustrating, they can be overwhelming. But again, the cool things that you get to do, not only in solving housing issues or trying to solve housing issues, but in bringing community together. You have an event called Don't Be Afraid of the Dark Photo Contest. And tell us about when this started. Is this new? I just love highlighting these things. I mentioned to you before we started recording, Steve Pauken is recently retired city manager in Bisbee, Arizona. And that's his hobby. He loves taking pictures of the night sky. You got to follow him on LinkedIn. Steve Pauken, amazing pictures. They're so inspiring. And he loves dark, the dark city certifications. He goes to all these places. And so he worked to get Bisbee to become a certified dark city. I know you guys are thinking about that. Tell us about this, because I think this is one of the things too. It's cool that local gov is trying to help, again, bring communities together and do cool things, not just for tourism, but for its own people. So tell us about that.
This is definitely one of the more, I will say, fun things that we do, but on a very serious topic. And it is the takeaway is like you can make it fun and try to make it fun, and then the community really responds to that. But this started, I guess, 2 years ago. We'll be going into year three. And it was part of council priorities. And we had a conversation at a council retreat about wanting to have dark skies certification. And out of that, we realized that there's awareness campaign that needs to happen first, and that we have a compliant ordinance, but people aren't aware of really the values of dark skies and why that is important for our community. It's part of our community character, really. There's environmental aspects to it as well, but really part of that character. And so we were basically gifted from our council, like, we'd like to do something with dark skies, have at it, in terms of awareness. And so there's a lot of room to figure out what we could do with that. And you start with the very standard, we can do social media posts, XYZ, and landed on a photo competition. Because if there is a topic that lends itself to education through art, could we think of a better one, right? Like that, it's so beautiful when you see these photos that even if you're not concerned about the environmental reasons to have night skies, the beauty of it and the magic of it alone is it makes you think and makes you pause. So the topic lends itself to that kind of creativity. We have a new cultural district in our community, and so we were able to partner with the cultural district to help spread the word and really bring in our local artists. And then we layered that on with a more traditional kind of government rebate program for dark skies compliant lighting. So if you wanted to change out your lighting to night sky compliant lighting, we had a rebate program for that. That was really very simple to use. We had really good feedback about that, but we kind of worked that piece into it, and it was all part of the same campaign. And I think the unexpected thing that we should have probably anticipated and we didn't was when we had the campaign go in our local paper, so it had a lot of community awareness around it. We did an art exhibit at the end of it the first year, which we're not art exhibit people. That's not something anybody really on our staff has expertise in, but it turned out beautifully. We worked with a couple local artists to help get that together, and the community really responded, and we connected with 80 or so community members that we don't usually connect with. We don't always connect well with our local art community and cultural community, and it was an opportunity for them to come engage and interact with us. And sure, there was one topic, but it opened them up to who we are as local government. We learned who they were as a kind of cultural community and art community. And it was surprising to us and something we didn't think about. We had about 100 people at the art exhibit opening where we announced the winners. And it was really enlightening to see that. And I think we learned a lot from that. Year two, we expanded it to be a partnership with the rest of the county. So kind of created the, you know, best of the West, best of the East. Let's see who has the better night skies and the better photography. So that was really fun. And then this third year, if it's approved in the budget through council, we're working with not only the cultural district, but our tourism association and our chamber to really start integrating in how there's astrotourism and how can we educate our visitors as well about the importance of this and how can that benefit our local economy and our businesses. So trying to really touch on all the different aspects of this in a really fun, beautiful way. And the pictures are gorgeous. I'll have to follow Steve on LinkedIn and check his out. But I think people that really weren't aware of dark skies have come to see these photos. We leave them up on display for a month or so in a very public space, and you can see people stop and look at them and really think about them. And some of the local artists actually have sold some of the photos to people that have attended, so it's helping to support them. There's a lot of benefits to it that we didn't really anticipate and happen naturally.
I love this because what seems, again, to have started as a more environmental desire to preserve kind of culture and context for a place all of a sudden turns into uh, wrapping your arms and inviting people who usually don't participate in government, your local artists, to go, hey, and think about that for someone listening. Your council, your board has an idea about what, perseverance or preservation. That's the word. Sorry, yeah, preservation and environmentalism, and then you go, okay, but how can we get people? How do we communicate? Well, how do we communicate? Let's invite people in. So you have artists, but then you have community members go, oh, the artists are doing this thing. We need to change out our lights so they can do their thing and get the right pictures. And then you have community members come in and look at the pictures. And it's like everyone gets to be a part of this thing. And so what grew is an idea. And just to encourage you, if you're listening, you're a local government leader and you're like, man, we have this initiative we need to do for, maybe it's something, especially in today's age where everything's kind of hyper political, right? Oh, environmentalism, that's a political issue. And so things can already be kind of divided, or they can already have tension in them. And it's like, think broader. Think, how do you bring people in? And it's like the circle. It's like the ripples of a pond. Okay, if we do this and we have artists, then how do we get other people to support the artists? Maybe not. Maybe it's by coming and seeing. Maybe it's by rechanging your lights so they can actually do this thing. There's just so many cool ways. And now tourists, and now you're just building and building and keeping the ripples going. And I love that. It's the power of local government. And so how can we be creative to think more broadly about participation instead of just, that's kind of the danger of leadership, is when we have something to do, we think, well, how do I do it? Instead of how do we do it? How do I get more people involved? Because that has real momentum.
And, don't forget to close it out well too. So we took the first year we did the competition, the photos that were submitted, we ended up making note cards and we packaged them up into a little package of 12 note cards. And that was we had those as swag items. And so that even spread it further, whether it was people picking up the swag items or you're mailing a note card to people, and the community loved them. They really loved the different photos. It had the artist names on it. So then people were driven to go look at their web pages or find out, and again, kind of promote our local photography culture. The second year we did notebooks and we did the same thing. Like they all have a different picture on them with the artist names, a link to the Dark Skies page on the back, and QR code. And keep spreading that word, just like you said, and think creatively about what people can use that would be meaningful, but help still with that education piece.
I love it. I love seeing things that bring people together because it's really belonging. And I think there's no better time. People are absent of belonging. We live very individual lives. We live very digital lives that don't really feel totally authentic because it's only a part of us or what we assume people want to see or expect of us. So anything that has more authenticity, I just think it's so beautiful. It's so cool. Well, I want to be mindful of your time. There's so many good things we could continue to talk about, but tell us, wrap up with that work-life balance reality, especially when you live in a place that seems like there's opportunity to go out and to hike and to just be around life, but there's so much work to do. And it's challenging too, I think, when your work is so missional. Again, you said that, like, I love seeing my impact on people makes you kind of want to work like all the time. And your work as a town manager, it's not 9 to 5. You've got evening meetings. You've got the dark, photo contest event. You've got the festival. You got it's 24/7, right? And so I think I have empathy because of a pastor's life. It's very on. And I'm sure in a town where you're known, when you go to the grocery store, people can stop you to celebrate the contest or to cry about the pothole on their street. So it's really a role that doesn't shut off. So how do I always say work-life balance is BS. There's no such thing. What there is intention. How do you intentionally fill your cup? How do you intentionally give yourself to the various aspects of your life? Maybe just chat about what's the struggle there and what are some of the opportunities you've seen to really continue to flourish?
I think it definitely is a struggle, and I don't know that I can say that I've personally found the right balance. We always are striving for that and trying, but we also have such a responsibility to community in these roles that it's really hard to figure out what that balance is. I think of work-life balance more about making sure and modeling what I can for our team so that our team is not having an unrealistic expectation. If I'm working all the time, then you kind of set that as the tone. And that's not the tone that we want in the organization and we want for our teams. And you're right, we work in this place that is an outdoor mecca. I mean, whether it's winter, summer, we have we have a community that has funded a tax measure to fund trails. Like that is so important to our community. They have taxed themselves for solely maintenance and expansion of our trail system. Um, so I think it's super important that we encourage our staff, use your time off. We want you to do that. We want you to leave at 5 or whatever the end of your day is and go for the bike ride. We have the sports teams that we sponsor so that the staff can get together and just have that collaboration. But I have to be cognizant of that too, right? Like I can't be in the office until 8 o'clock every night because then the staff start to think that's the expectation. So for me, that's really what drives my interest in making sure we find that work-life balance. Again, I don't know that I'm super great at it. I often go home and walk in the door and say, like, I'm out of words today. I've used them all out. It's kind of like I'm happy to listen, but I've kind of used the words up. But I'm working on that, and it's constant evolution. And take time. We've got a short period of time here to make a difference and use it, but also enjoy it and live life.
So good. It's so good. And I think it's a real brilliant point that I stress often. It's not just what you say, it's what you do. And people will follow your actions more than they follow your words. And so be careful that you're not just saying it, that you're modeling it. And it's so good. Man, what an incredible life, Jennifer. I'm so thankful you've taken the time to share with today. Anything else as we wrap?
No, I would just say, reference this, but anybody interested in getting into this line of work or in this line of work and how to grow in their career, take advantage of opportunities and really learn to hone in on your instinct and trust your instinct and follow that. I think that's really ultimately what it is. And be your authentic self. Like you said, everybody has a different management style, a different leadership style, a different approach to things, and just, grow in confidence in who you are and what your approach is and let that lead you.
So good. Truckee is definitely blessed to have you at the helm, leading just a great team and a great place. I can't wait to visit. Joe was like, "Oh, you got to come to South Lake Tahoe," and now he's not even there, the dirty dog. So
Come to Truckee.
I'm coming to Truckee instead. I'm going to hang out with Jennifer and just I got to walk all these trails. I love trail walking. It's so cool. So many gorgeous places in the country. So got to add it to the list. Well, thank you, Jennifer, for sharing your life, your leadership journey, and just the incredible insights you shared with us today.
Thanks for having me. First podcast was not scary, so thank you for that.
You're an amazing guest. Thank you so much.
Bye.
The stories we share here on the Halting Winter podcast remind us where government really lives, locally, right here in our cities, our counties, the communities that shape our everyday life. If today's conversation resonated with you, please subscribe and share the episode to help these stories reach others. I'm Seth Winterhalter. You can find me at HaltingWinter.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.